Hey everybody, Puzzle Max here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Grid Skewb, aka the mental block puzzle from LanLan. This puzzle was actually released back in 1996, originally made as a puzzle mod by Mr. Tony Fisher. This was recently released as a mass-produced puzzle by LanLan as the Grid Skewb. I don't want to say they stole this idea, but they did kind of take it without asking all the right questions, but they got together with Tony Fisher and kind of got things straightened out, so I didn't feel too bad buying it. But Tony Fisher made this back in 1996 as a modification of his own, where he did some extensions off of a regular Skewb puzzle. This is just a Skewb shape mod, and it really is just a modification of a Skewb. It solves exactly the same, but it looks and feels completely different during the solve. And that's what makes it such a cool modification, because when you look at it, it's very non-assuming. It looks kind of like a just a 3x3x1. But once you start doing some turns on this thing, it starts shape-shifting and it just turns into something completely different. So in this tutorial, I'm going to do a kind of side-by-side solve of a regular Skewb and the Grid Skewb. So just a couple things to cover here. First things first, just some piece comparisons. On this puzzle here, there are all the same pieces. Everything that's on a regular Skewb is present and visible on the mental block Grid Skewb puzzle. On a regular Skewb, you've got 6 center pieces and 8 corner pieces. Over here, you've got 6 center pieces and 8 corner pieces. Your 6 centers are all there, but not all of them look like centerpieces. So on a regular Skewb, all of your centers are these big, easy to find square pieces. Easy to see, easy to identify. But on the Grid Skewb mental block puzzle, on the flat faces, these little tiny squares on the yellow and white faces are obviously centers. They look like centers. But these big, fat pieces here are also centerpieces. So even though they kind of look like corners of sorts, these are also centerpieces. So these 4 corner type pieces are also centerpieces. So even though they've got 4 colors present, they also act as centers during the solve. And on the regular Skewb, these pieces with 3 colors present are the corners. 8 of those on this regular Skewb. On the Grid Skewb mental block puzzle, there are 8 of these little tiny pieces all around the Skewb, all around the puzzle, and these pieces have 2 colors each. These have yellow and another color. This one has yellow and green, yellow and red, yellow blue, yellow orange, and on the other side, white red, white green, white orange, white blue. These are your corner pieces. That means that these pieces are the ones where your pivot points are present when you make a turn. So on a regular Skewb, whenever you make a turn, that's where your pivot point is present. So whenever I make a turn, that is where that pivot point takes place. So on, say, a standard 3x3, whenever you make a turn, that centerpiece is where the pivot takes place. So that's where things are rotating around, that centerpiece. Same thing happens on a standard Skewb. That is the center of that axis. That's where that thing, everything is rotating around. Same thing happens on this puzzle. Whenever I make a turn, that is the center of the rotation. And that's what you have to keep in mind during the scramble and the solve of this, because otherwise it's very easy to get lost when you're both scrambling and solving this puzzle. And that's what took me the longest to keep track of when I was making both a scramble and a solve of this puzzle. Because the first thing that I really got lost of this is I was trying to hold this puzzle as a square. I was trying to hold it at this position when I was looking at it. And finally it dawned on me that, well, that doesn't work, because if I hold it like this, I'm not looking at a center, because this isn't a center. If I hold it this way, I'm looking at two corners. And that's the same way as if I'm holding a skewb like this. And that doesn't make sense, because then I'm looking at it like this. But if I hold a skewb like this, now I'm looking at a center. And now I can see what I'm looking at. And now I can see my pivot points. Now I can see a center. And that makes more sense because I know where my pivot points are, and I know kind of where my axes are. So it just helped me kind of identify where my pivot points were and what I was looking at. So for this, I need to hold this like this so I can identify my centers. And it helped me kind of understand what I was looking at. Another really key point of this is I had to make a big point of making sure that I was always moving these corners, and I'm always going to think of these and identify these as corners, even though they don't look like them. They function as corners. That's how I'm going to refer to them throughout this entire solve. I have to make sure that I move them to a new corner. So if I don't move this from this corner to where another corner was, I'm not going to be able to make another turn. So if I move this from this position to here, I can't make another turn. I can't use this position to make another turn. It just can't happen. So I have to make sure that I move this piece to where another corner was in order to make a new turn. And that's a really, really key thing to make sure that you do. And it starts to happen naturally as you do more things during the scramble. And it starts to flow a little better with the centers after you get the corners back in place. Because once you have the corners back where they belong, then you can start seeing, okay, now the centers need to go back to center positions. So this center needs to go where a center is. And then I can move center to center. And then things can flow the same type of way. The puzzle isn't terribly difficult, but it is hard to see at first, especially once you have it fully scrambled. As long as you understand the color scheme, things can fall into place pretty easily as far as keeping track of where pieces need to go and getting colors back to where they belong. It's as long as you know a basic Skewb solve, you'll be able to figure this out pretty easily. It is my favorite Skewb shape mod because it is so non-assuming. It doesn't look difficult, but once you scramble it, it looks like it's going to be a very difficult solve. So let's go ahead, scramble these both up. I'm going to solve them side by side and kind of explain them both as I go. So let's scramble the regular Skewb first, because if you have bought the Grid Skewb mental block puzzle, I'm just guessing that you know how to solve and know how to scramble a regular Skewb. I've left the link in the description that gives some credit to Mr. Tony Fisher for making the original mental block puzzle. I make no money for that, obviously. I just used that link because I want to give some credit to the original owner of the mental block puzzle, Mr. Tony Fisher. I like giving credit to the original people that did the amazing work for making these awesome puzzles. I'm not using the same scramble for these two solves, so there are definitely going to be some differences in both the solves here. So again, if you know how to solve one of these, you probably, if you know how to solve the original Skewb, rather, you probably know some things about both of these. The method that I'm going to be using here is a very, very basic beginner's method solve. I don't use any fancy algorithms or fancy advanced methods. I'm not an advanced speed solver of any kind. I don't use any stuff that is going to be getting me world records or advanced times. So for scrambling this, I'm just going to be doing just some very basic kind of go with the flow type of thing. I'm going to start by just moving pieces to new positions, kind of making sure that I move corners to new corner positions. So making sure that corners go to a new corner position every time. So let's just follow corners and making sure that corners go to where a corner originally was. And that's the main thing that I want to do. Sometimes I do double turns so that a corner gets mixed up twice. And obviously I'm going to miss a turn here and there because it's hard. There's some things that's just hard to follow on this puzzle. And even if you know what you're doing, what you're trying to do, things can get a little hard to follow because it is a little difficult once you start scrambling. It looks complicated, and it's made to do that. Like I said, it is non-assuming at first, but once things start getting mixed up, it starts getting far more complicated looking as you go. What's mixed up? There we go. That's what I like about it. It goes from so simple looking to so complicated very quickly. I try and do far more moves than I think I have to because I want to make sure I get a pretty good scramble here. There we go. Try and get things as twisted as possible. This is, as you know on a Skewb, as you probably know on a Skewb, it's easy to under-scramble, but it's also easy to over-scramble and get things back to a more than needed scrambled position where you've done too much and you're closer to solved than you realize just from having moved too much. Let's see, let's do that. And we've popped. All right, so with that, let me go ahead and pause here, reassemble this, and I'll come back in a second. So, all right, take two. And on that note, scramble carefully. I tried to reassemble that on camera, but I tried to keep this a little PG, and there were lots and lots of bad words involved. I'm not good at reassembling puzzles because I just have problems, and just it's not my best work. So I try to keep this just at least a little bit polite. So yeah, scramble carefully, do slow turns, and kind of keep things a little cautious. It's not a difficult reassembly, but it's can be a little frustrating. If it does pop on you, don't push things back. Don't push the force. Don't force the four corners that stay attached to the core back into the. Don't push them back into the core. They need to be extended from the core a little bit. Otherwise, they make it very difficult for the other pieces to be pushed back into place. Tony Fisher does have a bit of a tutorial back on his YouTube page that shows him putting the puzzle back together. It's not so much a tutorial as it is just him taking the puzzle apart and putting it back together. I'll put that in the description because who knows what'll happen while you're fiddling around with this. But just scramble and solve slowly, because if that happens to you, it can be a little frustrating. So just take your time, and this isn't a rough turning puzzle or anything like that. It turned very well right out of the box. I haven't had to lubricate this or anything. But if you're having a tough time figuring out where turns can be made or figuring out where the pieces go, then it can be a little difficult and you can get stuck. So don't force any turns or anything like that. Otherwise, as you saw, pops can happen. So just make sure that things are lined up before you try and make a turn. And I think that's about as far as I'm going to go. As you know, with the Skewb, things can get mixed up even more while you're making some of the first moves with a solve. So I'm going to leave it there. I think that should be pretty well scrambled. So I think that'll do it. Like I said, I'm going to do a side-by-side solve with these. So I'm going to do the first couple of steps, and then the first couple of steps on the regular Skewb, and then solve along with the Grid Skewb, aka mental block, and we'll get started right after this. So hang tight. All right. So first thing I do on a regular Skewb is fix all 8 of my corners. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix the white corners first. So go with the white face, and this is very basic. I'm going to go ahead and just pick a white corner. Doesn't matter which one. Let's go with this white, green, and red. I'm assuming you know how to solve a Skewb. This is a very beginner's method. I recommend you use an incredibly basic beginner's method here. You can use more advanced methods on this, but they will be harder to follow because this has much harder angles and things to see. You're going to have a much harder time keeping up with those angles and finding out which way things need to rotate, which way things need to turn. So it's just going to make it harder to follow. So first thing I need to see is this needs to go down here. So I just need to rotate this. I'm going to turn this around like this, and then rotate this down to the bottom. So now that's lined up down here. This white, orange, and green needs to go down here, so the green lines up with that. I just need to rotate this clockwise. It's going to take this green and red out of position, but I can put that back in pretty easily. So I'm just going to rotate this clockwise. I'm going to bring it down here, lined up with the white face, and then bring this green and red back down to the white face. Didn't take that out, put that in. This white, orange, and blue needs to come down here because it's already lined up to come straight down to here. I can just bring this straight down to line up with the orange without taking any of these white corners out of position with the white face. So I can just bring this straight down. So 3 of the 4 corners on this white face are already in place. This last white corner needs to rotate, because if I just bring this straight down to this last position, it's not in place. It's in place, but it's not oriented correctly. Sorry. For this, there's multiple different ways to do this, but I want this to be like I would do it on this Grid Skewb mental block puzzle. So most like I would do it on this puzzle. It's kind of the way I'm going to do this on this regular Skewb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in this position. It's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm just going to put this here. Now I'm going to bring this up here first. So I'm going to bring this up into this position, and I'm going to rotate it once clockwise and bring it back down into this position. Because that's now correct, I'm going to leave it there and then undo the rotation that I did in this position, bringing this piece back down. If that hadn't fixed this, I would just do that same maneuver, that same move again. Because that move, all that does is takes this piece out of position and rotates this piece once. That move is very simple, and it only takes this piece out, rotates this piece, and it doesn't mess up anything else. It's a very simple set of moves, and it only moves two pieces, so it's very easy to keep track of. So I like that situation, and it's a very easy set of moves to keep track of. So that just fixes all of those pieces on this white face. So that's the same thing I'm going to do with this, and it's just very easy to keep track of. So I'm going to do that same thing here, and I'm going to do it with the exact same thing. So find my white center. This can be anywhere on this puzzle. It's the exact same thing though, because the centers on the Skewb aren't fixed. It can happen anywhere on this puzzle the same way. So I'm just going to find my white center, and I'm going to start finding my white corners. They can also be anywhere on the puzzle. And I'm just going to start finding the white corners and start doing the exact same thing. So here's a white and red corner. It's already attached to the white face, and it's not oriented correctly. So I'm going to use the same move that I was doing with that last corner on the regular Skewb. I'm going to just bring it up to this corner position, rotate it once, and bring it back down. So I know that this corner can come up to this position, and I'm going to rotate it once clockwise and bring it back down and see if that puts it correct. I'm not going to try and get fancy here. I'm going to do this very, very basic. Even if I know that it needs to rotate a different direction, I'm not going to try and do that. I'm just going to keep things very, very basic. And I'm also just going to do this very simple. That's my main thought process with this, is keeping things as simple as I can. The entire time here, I'm going to be looking at a center, because I know that my white center is my bottom. This is another center. I know that this yellow is another center. I know that these big pieces are other centers. That's my main focal point the entire time here. So white is my bottom center. I know that these funny looking, I don't even know what shape to call these. These are my corner pieces. So I'm going to bring this piece up to a corner. I'm going to rotate it, rotate it clockwise by bringing another center to that position, and then bring this back down to that position where it started. Did that rotate it into position correctly? Yes, it did. So I'm going to leave that there correctly. Now I'm going to come around to another position, using my center as a focal point, keeping that as my kind of where I'm keeping track of things. Now I know that I don't want to put orange here because I have red here. Because I know how a puzzle's color scheme works, if I really want to get kind of fancy and kind of keep track of things, I can figure out what color needs to go here. But if I don't want to keep track of things, there's a trick with Skewbs that can tell me after I put 3 of these corners in whether I've done this correctly. And I'm going to show you that just so after this you'll know whether you've put these corners in the correct position. So as long as you know that red never goes next to orange, that's all you need to know. As long as you know that red and orange never go next to each other, you're good to go. So I know that this needs to be either be blue or green. Here's my blue, so this needs to go here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put this blue piece down here next to my red. So here's my red. I know that it's correct on this white one because it's laying flat. This blue one is not flat on this white face. Oh, way too high there. Sorry. So I've got my center. I know this is a center. So on my white face here, this blue one is not sitting correctly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up to this corner piece and rotate it once clockwise. So I'm going to bring this up to that corner position. I'm going to rotate it once clockwise. I'm going to bring it back down to the corner position I want it to be in, and I'm going to undo that corner rotation that I did. That's going to bring the red back down to that corner position, and let's see if it fixed that blue. Yes, it did. So that red is correct with the white, and this blue is correct with the white. So now we're going to come over one, and now this orange, because I know that red needs to be opposite orange, I know that orange needs to go here in this next position. So let's bring this orange down into this position here. So I'm going to bring this orange down into here. So just bring that down, and that's correct. So we have that down here. Now, that's laying flat. That's correct. Now here's the best cheat in the world. In order to tell if I've put all of these in the correct place, we come to the piece in the middle. I've put the red in, I've put the orange in, the piece in the middle, the blue one. If the piece directly above that, the yellow piece above this blue one, is correct, so if the yellow piece above this blue one is the yellow and blue piece, then I know that these pieces, the white red and the white orange piece, are in the correct locations. If it's not, if it's the yellow green piece, then I know that the white red and the white orange pieces need to swap. And we can see that this yellow and green piece is not matching this yellow and blue piece. So I know that the white red and the white orange pieces need to swap. We can see here that this is in fact the yellow and green piece. So I know that the white red and the white orange pieces need to swap. So, like I said, if you know the color scheme on your puzzle, you can obviously avoid this situation and not have to worry about it. But this is a really cool situation that on any Skewb shape mod, it's a really cool way of knowing whether you've put your pieces in the right situation. This is also very handy, especially on puzzles that don't have a way of telling whether you've put them in the right position. For example, like the container Skewb, things like that. So obviously I need to swap the white red and the white orange pieces. So let's go ahead and do that. So this white blue can stay where it is. I'm not worried about that. So let's go ahead and swap this white orange and this white red. So I'm going to bring this white red up here, and now I'm going to bring it back down here to this white and orange position. So I'm going to bring this down here. It needs to rotate. So in order to do that, I'm going to bring it up here. I'm going to rotate it and then bring it back down. So now that's correct. So now let's work from here. So now this blue is good, this red is good. So now what needs to go here? I need to find my white and green. So let's see. So there's my white and green. That falls into place. And last, my white and orange. White and orange is here. Let's see. White and orange is there. I can bring that up to here. Let's see. If I put this into position, goes there, it's not oriented correctly. So if I bring this up to here, if I bring it into position, it's not correct. So if I bring it up here, rotate it clockwise, bring it back down into position, undo that rotation to keep that correct. Still not correct, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring it back up to here. I'm going to rotate this clockwise. I'm going to bring this back down. And I'm going to bring that green back down. So now I've got all of that white correctly oriented. And if you notice, above each one of these, the yellow pieces are in the correct position. They're not oriented correctly, but they're in the correct positions. And you'll also notice on the regular Skewb, same thing. The yellow pieces on the regular Skewb are in the correct positions, but they're not oriented correctly. That'll happen on every kind of Skewb. If you get the bottom parts done, the top corners will be above them, but they won't necessarily be oriented correctly. So that's a really big Skewb, just kind of thing to note. It's once you get the bottom corners in the correct place, the top corners will be where they belong, but they won't necessarily be oriented correctly. So that's the first thing to do here, is just put all of the bottom corners in the correct place, oriented correctly. And the best way to do that is just put them in one at a time, just very, very cautiously, and you can, if you know the color scheme of your puzzle, you can do it pretty easily, and it's just a matter of being patient and using the centers to keep track of things. And once you remember that the centers are a good way of remembering where things are allowed to rotate and making sure that you move corner to corner, it starts to help things flow a little better. So that's the first step. Put all of the corners correctly oriented with either the white or the yellow, and that'll give you a pretty flat thing to start with on the bottom. Next up, we need to orient the yellow corners on top. This situation is pretty easy, and you'll have one of three situations. One where everything will be ready to go, another where two will need to be oriented, or the last where all four will need to be oriented. In this situation, we have two that need to be oriented. This one is going to take you through all three situations. So this situation, you've got two that need to be oriented. One that needs to turn counterclockwise, the other that needs to turn clockwise. What you need to do here is turn this so that the yellow face is on the bottom. Find the corner that needs to rotate clockwise. So this one here needs to rotate clockwise, and put it so that the yellow is facing right, and put that so that the yellow is facing to the right, and just do up up, down, down. That's going to give you headlights, where you have two yellows facing out and two facing like this. I'm horrible at describing Skewb orientations and colors and things like that, so you're just kind of have to bear with me here. So it's going to give you a situation that looks kind of like this. In this situation, you want to put it kind of like this, and put it so that the yellows are facing like this, where both of the two yellows are facing to the left. And you're going to do the exact same thing, where you're just going to do up, up, down, down. And that has successfully oriented all four of your yellow corners. It works exactly the same on the Grid Skewb. It's harder to look at, it's harder to think about, but it actually works exactly the same. On this one, you have the exact same things, and the yellows work exactly the same. They might look a little different, but the yellows do the exact same thing. So here, the yellows are facing out here the same way they were. So I'm going to put the two yellows that are pointing out, pointing this way. My center is here, so I'm going to put the center here. This center is down, this center is up, and I'm just going to go up, up, down, down. And what do you know? It's oriented all four of those yellow corners. It really is that simple. And say, for example, you had the other case that I had there. If I do a couple of quick setups here. So say, for example, I had this case where I've got two corners that are oriented correctly and two that need to rotate. If I take this corner here that needs to rotate clockwise in order to be oriented correctly, and this one that needs to rotate counterclockwise to be oriented correctly, if I take this one and point it to the right and do up, up, down, down, now I've got that headlights type situation. Now if I put those pointing out and do the same thing, up, up, down, down, now all four of those corners are oriented correctly. It's really the exact same thing as on the regular Skewb. And I don't know any better way to explain it, because it's just a matter of kind of doing it on a regular Skewb a few times and getting the feel for it. You start on the left and just kind of do the moves. If you just do start on the left, up, up, down, down. I don't know any of the fancy names for these things. Like I said, I'm not a speed solver of this puzzle. I don't have any fancy algorithm names or anything like that. But it's a very simple puzzle. It's a very simple algorithm. And it's just a matter of doing that simple set of moves. And it works. And it's the exact same set of moves that I'm going to do for fixing the centers for the rest of the solve here. So get comfortable with that. Do that set of moves a few times on the regular Skewb, and once you get a feel for that, you'll be able to solve the rest of the Grid Skewb, the mental block puzzle here. So hang tight, we'll fix these centers on the rest of this puzzle, and hopefully once you get a feel for that, it'll make sense for the next couple of steps here. All right, last thing we have to do is place and orient our centers. So on the regular Skewb, because these centers are just the same, there's no need to orient them. All we have to do is place them. So the algorithm here, like I said, is the exact same for fixing the corners, but there is some puzzle rotation that's involved. The algorithm that I'm going to do here is just going to be, what it's going to do is it's going to move the center from here to the back, the center from the back to the bottom, and the center from the bottom to the front. So it's going to be a pure 3 cycle. It's just going to go from here to here, down to here, and then to here. So what I'm going to do is this red needs to go to the back needs to go to the bottom, and the bottom needs to go to the front. So I'm going to go up, up, down, down. I'm going to rotate the entire puzzle 180 degrees, and I'm going to go up, up, down, down. And we're solved. Good to go. So on here, let's take a look at what we've got. The first thing I like to do here is get my yellow face solved, if I can. So let's see where we can do that. Let's see. If I keep the white face solved, since I've got that done, let's put that at the top, and let's see. This yellow, if I use that as my back, I can put the yellow face on the bottom, and this I can go to the back. The yellow that's on the back will go to the bottom, and whatever's down here will go to the front. So let's just take care of that first, and that'll put the yellow that's on the back on the bottom. So let's go from the front to the back. This yellow will come to the bottom, and this will come to the front. So let's go up, up, down, down, rotate the entire puzzle 180 degrees, and then up, up, down, down. And now my white is done and my yellow is done. So from now on, I'm going to be holding the puzzle like this, with my white and my yellow as my left and my right. So now let's take a look. This red and blue needs to go here. This is where things can get a little harder to see, but you just kind of got to use your eyes and think of things a little differently. So let's see where this red and blue needs to go. This red and blue needs to go to this position here. So if that's the case, then this needs to come down to here. So this needs to come to here. So if this goes to the back, this comes back to here, then this red and blue will come down to here, which will make it correct. So this red and blue will come down to here, and this green and red will come up to here. So that'll at least fix this red and blue. So let's go ahead and do that. So in this, I just need to keep track of things. So this is going to be my front, this is going to be my back. So I'm going to do that same thing. I just have to make sure that I keep the white as my left, the red as my right when I'm starting off. So I'm going to go up, up, down, down, do an entire rotation of the puzzle, 180 degrees. Up, up, down, down. And that's in place where it needs to be. Good to go. So what else? I've still got 3 out of place. We're good to go there. And now let's see what else I can fix. Well, since I've got 3 out of place, I kind of got lucky here. Let's see. This orange and green needs to go to this position, so that can be my down. This red and green needs to go back here, so this red and green I can bring straight across to the back. This orange and green will come down to here, and this blue and orange will come across to the front. So this will be a pure 3 cycle. This will come to here, this will come down to here, and this will come up to the front. So pure 3 cycle here. So we're just going to go up, up, down, down, full 180, and up, up, down, down. And there you go. It looks like we're solved, but uh-oh, that's in place, but it's rotated 180 degrees. And this can happen. It almost always will happen. You will have 1 or more of these, 1 or 2 of these, rotated 180 degrees in place. And this can happen on almost, and will happen, can and will happen on almost every Skewb shape mod out there. This is an issue that will happen because you have orientation on Skewb shape mods. This is an easy fix that again uses that same algorithm that I've been using, because you have, luckily because you have solid color centers that don't have orientation, this is an easy fix. The algorithm that I'm going to use here fixes orientation on the bottom and back centers, and it again uses just a variation of that same algorithm that I've been using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that algorithm once on the front. I'm going to rotate the puzzle 180 degrees. I'm going to use that algorithm twice, and then I'm going to rotate the puzzle 180 degrees, and I'm going to do that algorithm once more, and it's going to rotate the bottom and back centers 180 degrees. So we're going to just do that algorithm up, up, down, down. I'm going to rotate the entire puzzle 180 degrees, and then go up, up, down, down, up, up, down, down, and then 180 degrees, and up, up, down, down. And there you have it. A fully solved, back to the non-assuming form of the Grid Skewb, aka mental block puzzle. So hopefully that helped out somebody. Like I said, this is a ton of fun, and it's one of probably my favorite Skewb shape mod puzzle, and hopefully it was as much fun for you as it was for me. And as always, happy solving.